Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, stop it. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here with all of you tonight. I am from Texas, so howdy. I live in Austin, Texas with my husband, Doug, and our 7 children, and this is our 8th. I am pregnant. By the way, in case anybody couldn't tell, I'm 37 and a half weeks pregnant, and I hope you guys have a good OB-GYN around here, just in case something happens in the next 12 hours. So, anyway, it is really great to be here with all of you. I tell people we became pro-life and we couldn't stop breeding. Our oldest daughter is 12, and then we have 4 boys. They are 6, 5, 4, and 4. And then we have twin baby girls that are 2, and then this one. And, people are like, oh, you have 2 sets of twins. No, we have 1 set of twins, and then our youngest son was actually gifted to us through open adoption. So I'll tell you that story. I was in Atlanta speaking for a pregnancy center, and I am in this group on Facebook of about 30 women, and we're all really good friends. And one of the women in the group she lives in Maryland, and she's a sign language interpreter. And she interprets for the deaf community in her church. And she had become friends with a woman that she interpreted for. This woman was pregnant with her 4th child. She was married, but her current pregnancy had actually not been conceived with her husband. She had been the victim of a very violent assault and had conceived. And so she made an adoption plan for her baby. And 2 weeks before her due date, she got an email from the adoptive family saying, we've been thinking about it, and we've decided that since there's a possibility that your child could also be deaf, we don't want him. Because, when you have your own biological children, you always know exactly what you're going to get, right? So another family was called, but they weren't interested because the baby was biracial, and they wanted a white baby that looked like them. And so my friend posted in this group about the situation. She's asking us to pray, and she said, by the way, if any of you happen to know anybody who would be ready to and willing to adopt a baby in 2 weeks, let me know. And I looked at it and I said, we will. And so my friend immediately called me and she said, are you crazy? Because Carter at that time, he was only 6 months old, and I said, sure, we have so many babies in our house right now. I'm not even sure we'd notice another one if you threw one in. And I haven't slept in somewhere around 4 years, so it's fine. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to let the expectant mother know. And I was like, do it. We are in. So I hung up the phone, and I thought, I should probably call my husband now. What I really thought was, can I send this in a text? But I thought I better not. So I made the call, and he was sort of mad at me. I don't know if mad's the right word. He was more panicky because, my husband is actually a stay-at-home dad. So this really affects him more than me. So he didn't talk to me for a couple days, and then he finally called and he said, I've been writing a pros and cons list. And he said, every time I think of a reason, this is absolutely crazy, we should not do this, he said, I look into our future, and that little boy is always there. And he said, I think we should do it. And I said, honey, I am so glad to hear you say that, because the lady doing our home study is going to be at the house tomorrow. So it would have been weird if it was a no. So, So 2 weeks later, a baby was born, and we flew to Maryland to meet him for the first time and to meet his amazing birth mother. And we were trying to think of a name, what we should name him. And we are Catholic converts, and we like to name our kids a family name and a saint name. And so we already have the family name picked out. And we wanted to name the baby a name that started with the letter J, because his mother's name starts with J, and her 3 other children, their names start with J. So we wanted to honor her in that way. And but at that time, we'd only been Catholic for about 3 years, and there are so many saints. And so I couldn't think, like, what name should we use? So I went online to like saints.com or something. And I clicked on the J's, and I started going through the list, and nothing was really jumping out at me. And I got to the bottom, and I saw St. Jude. For those of you that don't know, St. Jude in the Catholic faith is the patron saint of desperate or impossible cases. And I thought, you know what? That's the perfect name for this little boy, because there had to be times when his mother felt like God had given her an impossible cross to carry. When she found out she was pregnant, she went to family and friends and mostly people in her church looking for advice, looking for support. And they in turn told her, well, this is the one time that abortion is okay. This is the one time that abortion is acceptable. And she very courageously looked at them and said, it's a baby all the time, or it's a baby none of the time. And how sad is it that she had to remind people from her church that when God creates, he makes no mistakes. But there had to be times where she felt desperate. 3 times her child was rejected in the womb before birth. Once because of how he was conceived, then again because of a possible hearing deficiency that he doesn't have, by the way, and then again because of the color of his skin. There had to be times of desperation, but every day she woke up and she chose life for her son. I think about Jude, I think about his life, I recognize truly what a miracle it is that he is with us today. But honestly, when I look at the numbers, the statistics across the country, these abortion numbers that we have in the United States, 1 in 4 women having abortions, almost 3,000 abortions taking place every single day in the United States. Almost 1 million abortions every single year. I realize that truly any child who is born into our society today is a miracle. Now, I would love to tell you I've always stood up here and defended life. You know that's not true. You might have seen my story in a little film called Unplanned. How many of you saw it? Yay! A lot of you. Awesome. So, I grew up in a Christian home. I've got amazing parents. They've been married for 41 years, I think. I should know that. I'm the only child. That's my responsibility. But anyway, I was raised in church. I was raised in a Southern Baptist church. I remember my parents saying that we were pro-life. I remember my parents saying that we were against abortion. In fact, I remember in high school saying that we were a pro-life family, that we were against abortion, but we did not sit around the dinner table and talk about abortion issues. We did not talk about what it was to be pro-life or pro-choice. I think most of you in this room can probably understand where I'm coming from there. It just wasn't something that was really discussed. It wasn't in the media very much during that time. And I think my parents just believed that, they had taught me God's plan for marriage, and as long as I followed that plan, then abortion would never be something that was on the table. I tell people we were a family who said we were pro-life, but we were not a person who actually lived like we were pro-life. So I went to college and met a woman from Planned Parenthood, and she started telling me all of their talking points. And as someone who was truly ignorant about either side of this debate, her talking points sounded good. We're there to help low-income women receive health care. See, I don't know if you know, but Planned Parenthood is the only place that low-income women can receive health care. See, it's a lie, but I didn't know it was a lie because I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know the plight of a low-income, uninsured, underinsured woman. I've always been very blessed to have health care available to me whenever I needed it. So when she told me this, I didn't have any reason to believe that she wasn't being honest. But the truth is that what she was giving me, these talking points she was giving me, they were all lies. But that's what happens with a lie. When someone speaks a lie enough times, people will begin to believe it is the truth. And then the most interesting thing happens. Then the person speaking the lie, they will actually begin to believe that it is true. She talked to me about all these back alley abortions that would be taking place if we got rid of legalized abortion. Safety of women was paramount, she said. And these pro-lifers, they just want to take away our rights to our bodies, to do with them what we will. They're going to go after our rights to abortion, and then what's next? Then they're going to tell us that women no longer have a right to vote. And then what? Then they're going to say, well, women aren't allowed to wear pants anymore. And I thought, well, I like pants. So I signed up immediately. And I tell people it's what I didn't know about the abortion industry. That's what led me in their doors. And I submit to you tonight, it is what the majority of women in our society do not know that leads them in the doors of the abortion industry. It's what they do not know about their bodies, their fertility, their unborn child, the abortion procedure itself. And friends, it's what they do not know about the radical mercy of Jesus Christ. That's what leads them in the doors of these clinics. And people ask me all the time, Abby, how is it that you went from being this good Christian kid? I was a pretty good kid. I didn't do very many things wrong that my parents found out about. How is it that you went from being that kid to being someone who ran an abortion clinic? How'd you go from being that person to being someone who laid on an abortion clinic table, not once but twice, to take the lives of my own children by abortion? Abby, how did that happen? And I guess I don't have just a silver bullet answer for you tonight, except to say that it happened just a little bit at a time. Because that's the way that sin works in our lives. It's one little lie at a time, one little compromise at a time, one little justification at a time. I may not know much, but I know that the road to immorality takes place at a very slow decline. But I know that when God wants to change your life, it can literally happen like that. And that's what happened to me in the fall of 2009. 2009 had been an interesting year. I had been awarded Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year award. You can hold your applause. I know you're all very proud of me. But I was really excited. A few months later, we had some changes going on inside of our affiliates that caused me some concern. A few months after that, in August, we had a budget meeting where I was instructed to double our abortion quota, which didn't make sense to me because I firmly believed that our goal at Planned Parenthood was to keep abortion safe, legal, and rare. And certainly that had to be the truth. I mean, we had been saying it for years at Planned Parenthood. We heard President Bill Clinton say it. We heard President Barack Obama say it. They wouldn't lie. And so I thought, well, it must be true. But here it was on black and white. We were going to double our abortion quota. So I said this out loud to my supervisor. She didn't like it. And she basically said to me, Abby, why would we try to reduce the number of abortions? That's how we make our money. And I remember walking away from that conversation wondering if it was that the organization was somehow changing, or was it that now I was finally seeing what we had been about all along. Now I was in such a high place in leadership that I was seeing what we had been about all along, and I realized now it was the latter. Nothing had changed. This is what we'd always been about. I'm not really sure how I justified that conversation, but somehow I did. A month later, we had a visiting physician come in from out of town. He performed abortions differently than our protocol stated at Planned Parenthood. He performed abortions using ultrasound guidance during the actual procedure. And that was something I had never seen before. Now, we used an ultrasound at Planned Parenthood, but we only used it to determine how far along the woman was in her pregnancy so that we would know how much to charge her for the abortion. And then the ultrasound was moved away. We did not give her the opportunity to view her ultrasound. We did not give her the opportunity to know anything about her pregnancy. Is she pregnant with twins or triplets? We didn't even tell her we were going to do an ultrasound. And we were supposed to. But laws are only as good as their enforcement. And unfortunately, there is very poor enforcement inside of our abortion facilities across the country. So, this doctor was explaining to me it was safer for the patient if the doctor could actually see what he was doing during the abortion procedure. And that made a lot of sense to me because I could not think of any other surgical procedure where the doctor does not visually see the part of the body that he's operating on. I don't know about you, but if I'm in my dentist chair about to have a root canal and he rolls up on a stool with a blindfold on, I'm going to get up and leave. Yet performing abortions in this blind manner is the standard procedure inside of abortion clinics across the country, and abortion is the most common surgical procedure in the United States. So when I started thinking about it, I thought, well, it's no wonder we have such a high rate of uterine perforation where the doctor will literally poke a hole through the woman's uterus because he cannot see when to stop pushing that cannula. He cannot see when to stop pushing that suction tube. I went back to my supervisor and I said, if this is the safest thing for women, why isn't this the standard of care inside of our clinics? And she said to me, well, it is safest for women, but using an ultrasound during the actual abortion procedure takes up about an extra 3 minutes of time. And our goal inside of Planned Parenthood was to have a woman on the table, off the table, abortion complete in 5 minutes. So if you're trying to perform anywhere from 30 to 60 abortions a day, you just don't have an extra 3 minutes of time per patient. So I accepted that answer. This doctor told me that he was going to try one of these procedures. He wanted us to see it. He thought it would be a good learning experience for us. My job was to hold the ultrasound probe on the woman's abdomen so that the doctor would be able to, in his words, visualize his target. I looked at the screen, we did the measurement. Baby was 13 weeks along. Now, 13 weeks, just for information, everything on that baby is completely formed. Arms, legs, fingers, toes, heart's beating, brain waves are active. Every single internal organ that we sit here with today is formed in the womb by 13 weeks. Outside of the womb, the baby's about this big, and we can even tell if it's a boy or a girl. Now, I stood there looking at that screen feeling apprehensive, but reminding myself of the talking points that Planned Parenthood had given me. That this fetus had no sensory development or would not feel anything until the 28th week. So I stood there reciting that answer to myself over and over again in my head, trying to make myself feel better because I was unsure about what I was about to witness. And I could see that suction tube, that cannula, the suction wasn't yet turned on. I could see it going into the woman's uterus, and I could see it getting closer and closer to the side of this baby, and when it finally touched his side, he jumped. And he began flailing his arms and legs as if he was trying to move away from the abortion instrument, but there was nowhere for him to go. He was fighting for his life in a place that should have been the safest for him. When the doctor got the cannula in the correct position, he asked the technician to turn on the suction machine, and he said, "Beam me up, Scotty." And the suction was turned on, and I think people make the assumption that what I saw next was the worst part, that seeing a child become dismembered in his mother's womb would be the worst part. And that was bad, but I knew that was going to happen. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that when I had the opportunity to intervene, when I had the opportunity to do something to stop what I was seeing, I just stood there. I did nothing. I remember wanting to sit this woman up and just say, look what's happening to your baby. Make them stop. But I didn't. I just stood there and I watched. In just a few seconds, the screen was black, and I knew that meant the abortion had been successful. I walked back to my office that day. I didn't really know what to think, but I knew that something was going to have to change in my life, and I knew that that was going to mean walking away from my career with Planned Parenthood, walking away from my friends, walking away from really what I thought was my identity. And I didn't know where to go, and I knew that There were pro-life people in the community who had reached out to me. As I walked into work, they stood in front of my clinic. They reached out. They told me if there was ever a time I wanted to leave my job, that they would be there to help me. I never, ever thought that day would come. Just like I said, I never would drive a minivan. And now I drive a 12-passenger van. So, joke's on me. But I remember sitting there and I started to pray, really praying for the first time in 8 years and asking God where I should go. And I felt very strongly that I should go to these people, to this pro-life group. And I thought to myself, nah, give me somebody else, like anybody else. But I knew that was where I needed to go, so I ran out the back door. I got in my car. I could have walked to their office because it was conveniently located next door. But I got in my car and I walked through their back door. I sat on their couch and I didn't even know what to say, because what do you say? I'm sorry? That didn't seem like enough. But as I sat there, I started counting. I started counting the years and the days and the number of patients, and I realized in that moment that I had been complicit in over 22,000 abortions. And I didn't know how to live with that kind of burden. I didn't know how to live with that kind of sin, and honestly, I wasn't sure that I wanted to. But just in that moment of despair, God reminded me that there was absolutely nothing I could do to make up for what I had done. But he also reminded me that because of his radical and scandalous mercy, I didn't have to. And it was like in that moment, I could almost feel my heart turning from a heart of stone into a heart of flesh. It was like I could feel him creating me into something new. I decided I would go ahead and resign from Planned Parenthood. Not to worry, I gave him a good 5 minutes notice. But I told the pro-life group, the Coalition for Life, I was going to be resigning that day, and so they sent a young man out to be on the sidewalk to be there for that moment, just to be sure that I was able to leave without incident. His name was Bobby. And so I was taking my last load of stuff to my car, and I waved to Bobby. I told him I would be by their office the next day. I got in my car, I pulled out of that parking lot for the last time, and I took a left. And I came immediately to a stoplight, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and Bobby didn't know I could see him. He didn't know I was watching, but I saw him in my mirror. He put his arms in the air, and he fell to his knees. Because there had to be times where they looked at me and they said, she's never leaving. She's been here for 8 years. She's mean to us. She mocks us. Look, the movie was very gracious to me. I was not near that nice. I mocked them. I mocked their faith. I did turn the sprinklers on them. But every day, they still continued to pray for me. Probably sometimes in disbelief, believing that it would never even happen. And then one day, just like that, it did. You see, I am standing in front of you today as a testament to the power of conversion. No one is beyond the power of conversion because no one is beyond the power of Jesus Christ. And that's what this movement has to be about. It has to be about conversion. Conversion of hearts for the women who are considering abortion. Because if we convert her soul, if we help to create an eternal conversion in her, then life will naturally follow. But also conversion for the fathers who are involved. As far as I know, there has only been one woman in the history of mankind to conceive without the physical presence of a man. Some of you are like, who is it? You see, I believe one of the primary antidotes to abortion is fatherhood. But we live in a society today where almost 50% of young men in the home are growing up without fathers or without fathers in the home. And this church is one of the areas where I believe we have failed. We have not shown up. We have not stepped in that gap to be mentors to these young men, to show them God's plan for man, to show them how to be a father, a husband, a protector, a provider. We haven't done it, so we have allowed society to do it. And friends, that has been the greatest failed experiment of our time. We have forgotten how to be the moral authority in our children's lives. And look at where we are. People have fallen so far away from God and His plan, they don't even know who they are anymore. We have men wanting to be women. We have women wanting to be men. There was recently some woman who filed for a marriage certificate to marry her dog. And I'm not even trying to be funny. This is where we are. And make no mistake, it is because the Christian church has been silent on these issues for far too long. Why? Because we're scared to offend somebody? Please. Let me be honest with you, because I haven't been up until now. Let me be straight with you. The people on the other side of this debate, the people who are against God, are not in the least bit concerned about offending you. In fact, they revel in your offense. And instead of standing up and standing firm on the promises of God and His absolute truth, we have cowered into the corner and we have allowed them to take over the morality of this nation. And I am here to tell you, enough is enough. I will not be silenced into submission. In fact, every time they try to silence me, I will speak a little bit louder and a little bit louder and a little bit louder. You know, I grew up in church my entire life. Wednesday night, youth group, youth camps, Sunday night, Sunday morning. You know, I didn't hear a sermon on abortion until I was 29 years old. I'm real pumped that there are so many pastors here tonight. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to give you a standing ovation for being here, because this is exactly where you should be. Our church is in a crisis right now. Almost 60% of women having abortions, they're not coming from the other side of the tracks. They're not coming from the bad neighborhoods, friends. They are coming from our churches. Clergy, it is time for you to stand up at your pulpit and lead your people on this issue. People in your congregation cannot heal from their sin if they don't know what their sin is. Now is the time, friends. Now is the time to sacrifice more than ever. It is the time to speak up and speak out more than ever. It is time to be the hands and feet and the mouthpiece of Christ. You know, I hear people all the time, they say, Abby, you know, I pray for an end to abortion all the time, and it almost makes me sort of laugh, because God is not sitting up there saying, well, I would end abortion, but I haven't heard enough prayers from Susan. Guys, God hates abortion. He abhors evil, and abortion is evil. You don't have to pray and convince him. Every time I think that we pray and we say, God, please end abortion, he looks down at us and says, okay, let's end abortion. Let's do it. Be my hands and feet. Be my mouthpiece. You know what? Maybe we should change our prayer. Maybe instead of asking God to end abortion, maybe we should ask God to break our heart for what breaks his. Because when we truly understand the sorrow that Christ has for the destruction of the life he creates, then and only then will it create an urgency in us that will not be able to be shaken. This right here is not your pro-life activity for the year. You got a good meal, you're sitting in a cushy seat, there's air conditioning, you're all dressed up. This is not what it is. This is not what it is to be pro-life. This is what it is to say you're pro-life. I want you to live like you are pro-life. I want you to sacrifice. You know, you guys in Florida have the same problem we have here where I live in Texas. There are 5 states that make up more than half of the abortion numbers in our country. You know what they are? Texas, Florida, Illinois, New York, California. We are blessed to live in a conservative state, yet we have some of the highest abortion numbers in our nation. We have a problem. And we're going to keep working at it. We're going to keep fighting it. We're going to keep passing legislation that regulates the abortion industry until they can no longer perform abortions any longer. But friends, That cannot be our end goal. Our end goal cannot be to simply make abortion illegal. Our end goal must be to make abortion unthinkable, so that a woman who is in a crisis pregnancy would never even think about darkening the door of a place that would take the innocent life of her child. That must be our goal. But that's only going to happen through conversion, through testimony. If you have a story, share it. God did not bring you through trials so that you could keep your past bottled up. You know, there is such freedom in releasing that. Satan controls what we keep in secret. Get it out. Share your story. Share your testimony. Your testimony could be the reason that a woman chooses life for her child. Your sacrifice, your service, that's how we make abortion unthinkable. Go and stand out in front. You know, you got a bunch of abortion clinics here. Go and stand out in front of your local abortion clinic. Go and watch women walk into a facility and walk out a broken woman. It's hard. It's hard work. That's what it is to be pro-life. God did not call you here to be comfortable. He did not call you here to see how many friends you could get on Facebook. He did not call you here to win a popularity contest. God put you on this earth for one reason and one reason alone, and that was to be evangelizers of His gospel. And part of His gospel is the gospel of life. We have a truth so profound, so good. Why wouldn't we share that with everyone we encounter? Why wouldn't we do that? How selfish of us to keep this eternal truth, this good news to ourselves. Don't let fear keep you from preaching God's word. Fear has no place here. Because we are a people of freedom. We are a people of testimony. We are a people of life. You know, people say to me, I don't know, Abby, I don't know if we're ever going to win. I mean, the other side, they've got Bill Clinton and Bill Gates and stacks of bills. But you know what, in the end, it really doesn't matter who they have on their side. Because I am not speaking to you tonight from a place where I hope we will see victory. I'm speaking to you from a place of victory because I know who wins this battle in the end. But until that day of victory comes, let us act, let us sacrifice, let us serve. Let us do something for the least of these. Let us make abortion unthinkable. Thank you all so much, and God bless you.